Okay, so today we're going to be talking about loopholes in game design, courteous of Julian Pritchard. So to start, we're going to define what a loophole is. So a loophole is a clash between two rule systems that result in a new unintended solution within a game. Um, Loopholes are typically degenerative strategies, which basically means they're an always win strategy, like this is always going to win. Dominant, there's another thing called a dominant strategy, which is similar, but a dominant strategy is this is going to win most of the time, right? But now that we have like a general idea of what a loophole is, why would we consider them bad? So gameplay is made up of two key components generally, and then within those components there would be other things, but that's not what we're focused about. So gameplay is made up of the challenges that the player is facing from minute to minute, as well as the actions that the player is permitted to take to combat these challenges. What a loophole does is it allows for a new solution or a new action for the player to take for their challenges that break the game. To be blunt, not break, but change how the player thinks when approaching challenges, right? So if I were making a sword fighting game or whatever, and there was a loophole in the game where if you pushed a player or pushed an enemy into a wall and you push them hard enough or like fast enough at a certain angle, it would cause them to instantly die. Within the player's head, that is now a new solution to every challenge they face. And it's an easier solution more often than not, because if you have to spend 10 minutes fighting a boss or 3 minutes pushing it into a wall, you're going to take 3 minutes. This sort of falls under one of the other bad things about loopholes is that they remove meaningful choice. Meaningful choice is, or how I would define it, is if you give the player two choices that are evenly weighted in the player's head, then they need the key there is evenly weighted, or evenly weighted, because if they aren't, it doesn't have any meaning, right? If I give you the choice between saving one character you like and one character you also really like, that's a hard choice to make, and it has meaning because you like both of those characters. If you like one character and there's some other character you don't give a fuck about, I might as well just give you this one option of to save the character you like, because the other option doesn't even exist in your head. That's essentially how you would think of meaningful choice. And then the loopholes affect that because they add in this other solution of easy to beat, easy to do X, Y, Z, easy to get to here, easy to win, easy to whatever. Loopholes are a choice within the player's arsenal that will always be picked because it is the easiest and best working solution. So some types of loopholes that he mentions, or at least one I found interesting, was one called fortune hunting. Fortune hunting is when a player loads into a randomly generated level, and when they load in, they assess the level based on how hard or easy it is, and then reload the level if it's not within their desired difficulty. Risk of Rain 2 subverts this loophole in a similar way. With Risk of Rain 2, you're not looking for difficulty, you're looking for the amount of loot it would have, right? Like the quality of items it would have. With Risk of Rain 2, because when you start, you're so slow, the player has to invest a lot of time in exploring the level in order to make the decision of, is this level good or not? And if you make the player invest time into exploring a randomly generated level, or even a level regardless, they are much more likely to keep playing than if they just load in and are able to look around and be like, oh, okay, it's hard, or it's easy, or there's not enough loot, or there's too much loot, or whatever. I don't know about too much, but you know what I'm saying, where it's like if you make them invest more time, they're less likely to just do such an easy loophole. So that's a type of loophole. Now we're going to talk about how to find loopholes within your own design. So since I'm assuming a lot of you aren't designers, I'm not going to go too heavily insane in here, But I can talk about a couple of these that I think are interesting. Uh, One primary one is he talks about loophole patterns. Loophole patterns are essentially, think about it like every genre probably has their set of loopholes, right? An FPS probably has a lot of loopholes that have already been discovered and fixed with shooting or projectiles or grenades or something like that, right? Think about it like a grenade can hit through a wall. That's probably not intended, but technically it's probably still within the grenade's radius, right? So that would be a loophole. But there's ways to subvert those loopholes that have already been discovered. So loophole patterns would be loopholes that exist within a specific genre of game. And it's important that if you're trying to fix something, you see, okay, does this already exist within my genre? If so, how have other games fixed it? Um, Another thing he talks about is understanding player motives. So whenever you're making a game, you need to understand what the player's objectives are. What's the player trying to do, and what do we allow them to do? And if you understand, like, if you have like a list of those, and you can go down and go, okay, what affects this one? What affects this one? What affects this one? What affects these motives? And then you can see what systems those are affected. You can sort of what's it called, nip loopholes at the bud before players are really allowed to exploit them. Um, but yeah, he also talks about not killing emergence. Emergence is a kind of gameplay that I don't know a whole ton about. I'm pretty sure it's it's like when new gameplay comes out of already existing gameplay, if that makes sense. Like the player finds something to do within a game that wasn't intended, but because we allow them to do certain things or a combination of things, it makes a new gameplay experience. Um, but yeah, that would be how to find loopholes within your own designs. He then talks about how to fix them. I don't agree with a lot of his solutions. I thought they were too general in terms of or like not general, but like he had one where it was like change the affected system, and then it was like how to change the affected system. But it wasn't like how to change. He specifically said, right, component breakdown, break down the components of a loophole and why it's happening. And then he said change the component, and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You want to change the thing that you just broke down. But I was like, it was just weird. I didn't particularly find interest in that part of this article. But after he talks about that, he talks about the fact that not all loopholes require fixing. So earlier I had mentioned that loopholes are unintended optimal solutions. Sometimes these solutions aren't exactly optimal. They're just unintended, right? So with puzzle games, a lot of times, at least in Portal, when the developers were designing, according to this article, to be clear, because I don't know much about Portal development, but when Portal was in development, Jesus Christ, while they were designing puzzles, they would find unintended solutions to their puzzles. And if these solutions aren't like, if I jump here, I just win, but it's a more complex set, or it requires you to think differently in a more creative way, if it's still getting the desired gameplay of creatively problem solving, then even though it's a loophole, you would probably want to still keep it. Because if the creative player tries it and it's like, no, it's blocked because of dumb shit, then it's like, man, that sucks. Guess I'll go do your lame solution. Like it's sort of like you want to still allow the player to think creatively, but you don't want to allow their creative thinking to break the game. So that's one thing he'd mentioned. Another thing he talked about was loopholes becoming their own mechanics. Quake 3, as well as a lot of the Quake games, had something called strafe jumping, and I don't know if it exists in current Quakes, but I know it existed in other ones, where it was essentially a complex form of movement that would allow players to have an edge in gameplay. Technically, this is unfair, because a player who can strafe jump is probably going to beat a player who can't strafe jump. But on the same coin, it's a really hard skill to learn. So if you were to remove it, it's like, okay, but the players who spent all that time strafe jumping or learning to strafe jump, their joy is removed. So that's a situation where it's a difficult loophole to learn. It's not easy. You can't. It's not just like press a button or move an enemy. It's a complex set of inputs that you have to learn. You know, so it would be an acceptable loophole. Um, as for the unfairness part, I don't know. Get fucking good. I think that's it though. This article was super long and I trimmed a lot of stuff. And I still got to 10 minutes, but we did it. I will post another one tomorrow.